Are the owners upset at the players because they now have all the power to move around the league and go wherever they want? They sign these short-term deals, whether it's 2 years and an option, or in the case of a lot of these guys, Anthony Davis, who we talked about yesterday, potentially going to the Chicago Bulls after a year, 1 year and an option. And it creates some chaos. Now, as fans, you love it because in any given year, you could potentially get one of the NBA superstars. And what's better than that? You become championship viable literally with the snap of your fingers. As media, we love it because there's things to talk about. It's fantastic. But as owners who used to have a lot of control over player movement, it's got to be frustrating, especially if you're a smaller market team. Now, there's a couple of teams that in this article that I read on ESPN by Zach Lowe and Brian Windhorst, who are really good at reporting things that go on in the National Football League. They talked about what Michael Jordan said. And Michael Jordan was probably being pragmatic. Whatever his agenda is down in Charlotte, they haven't put out a winner consistently. Their best players they can't seem to hold on to. But he pragmatically said, look, we got to probably look at changing free agency. And you know what? He's probably right. Mark Lazary, who is the co-owner, one of the owners of the Milwaukee Bucks, had a more direct and probably emotional argument towards enforcing or at least making enforceable tampering rules, particularly because of his superstar, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's kind of already being tampered with. We didn't miss his brother getting signed by the Los Angeles Lakers or picked up by the Los Angeles Lakers on waivers. Is that tampering? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're going to try to woo one of the stars in the league, the current MVP in the league, signing your brother to a guy who has I think 2 buckets, maybe just 1 bucket in his NBA career, kind of feels a little bit like tampering. And it's interesting because even Adam Silver knows that these things are going on. In Las Vegas, at the end of the sessions, when speaking to the media, he said this, quote, "Frankly, things are being discussed that don't fall squarely within the collective bargaining agreement." That don't fall squarely within the collective bargaining agreement, which brings us back to Kawhi Leonard and something that was dropped this morning by Stephen A. Stephen A. putting on his reporter hat, which isn't always a reporter hat. It's just an opinion hat. But he brought it up, and it got a little bit of traction. And so we'll dig into it a little bit. Kawhi Leonard has an uncle, Dennis Richardson. Uncle Dennis, people call him, who is involved in his negotiations and his marketing and in his contract work. He's a family member who has the best interest of his nephew at heart, you would think. But apparently, at least allegedly, I should say, Uncle Dennis was asking the LA Clippers and other teams for houses on the arm, use of private planes, sponsorship deals, things of that nature, things that would bring extra revenue into the pockets of said superstar, in this case, Kawhi Leonard. Why they need extra money when they're making $100 million of guaranteed contracts? Not quite sure, but that is what it is. But the reality is it's against the rules. And if it's against the rules, then it needs to be enforced. Now, to bring it full circle, let's take a look at where he went. The LA Clippers, for a long time, were irrelevant. They started out in Buffalo, then they were in San Diego. They made the postseason a couple of times, but nothing really past the first round. Once they moved to Los Angeles, they did get into the postseason, got to the conference semis a few times, but for a large part have been the second citizen of Los Angeles to the Los Angeles Lakers. And then Donald Sterling happens. And Donald Sterling, as many people can attest to, especially Los Angeles Clippers fans, his screw-ups and ultimately being forced to sell the team was probably the greatest thing that happened to the LA Clippers. Why? Because Steve Ballmer comes in and buys the team. Now, Steve Ballmer was one of the first 50 employees. I think maybe it was like the first 30 employees at Microsoft. And so obviously he did extraordinarily well. He's got this high energy, like this motivating persona. You see him on the sideline. He's always up and jumping around and getting excited. He's an engaged owner. Sometimes owners are invisible, but Steve Ballmer is an engaged owner. And the one thing that you've noticed over the last couple of years, especially with Steve Ballmer at the helm, is that the LA Clippers are doing everything that they can, whether it's rearranging their front office, whether it's finding, these players off the scrap heap who they can bring in and build a culture. They're doing everything that they can to bring themselves to top relevancy in the NBA, particularly in the Western Conference. And I guess more specifically, a contrast to the LA Lakers, who seem to be a little bit chaotic right now. And if you're Steve Ballmer and you're willing to financially pull out all the stops, if you're willing to motivationally make all of this happen, are you not, especially with a net worth of over $40 billion, going to do a little bit of this under the table business to bring in one of the great superstars? Now, I'm not accusing them of doing anything, but I'm just speculating because this is clearly happening. This doesn't get reported unless it is. Now, where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's no proof around this. But listen to what Rick Buchanan, who is the general counsel for the NBA Board of Governors, mentioned in this Las Vegas meeting. Now, it's supposed to be goodwill. These are owners that are probably upset with other owners, and they have the big market teams like the Knicks and the Lakers and Houston and Dallas and things of that nature where there's money and there's profitability. There's easy access to sponsorships, and it's easier in some ways to lure free agents. But Rick Buchanan said to these owners, somewhat jokingly, but probably not as jokingly as I want to make it out to be, what if we start seizing your computer servers or your cell phones and find out that you are blatantly tampering? Because we know that this is happening. We know it's either players tampering or we know that there are owners and insiders inside these organizations doing things that are against the collective bargaining agreement. And this is a big story because it's going to come to a head. Eventually, owners are going to get fed up with the players having all of this power. But the question that you need to ask, and me as a media member, you all as fans on the other side of this glass even, or on the other end of the radio, the question is, do we even care? Or do we want the wild, wild west to continue? I got to tell you, this offseason was as engaged in basketball and a non-game that I've been in forever. It was speculative. It was fun. It felt like for the first time in a long time, there was actually parity in the NBA. I got tired. I know you guys have to get tired of this as well, of saying, oh, okay, the Golden State Warriors are going to be in the NBA Finals. They didn't win this year, but they were in the NBA Finals. And if they hadn't gotten two of their best players hurt, I'm sure they would have won. Right? That conversation, while exciting for a little bit because a dynasty is building, it got boring. It got stead. You got tired of it. You actually were okay, even though it's morbid to say it, that KD got hurt and that the Toronto Raptors did something spectacular because it was outside of what we expected. And now you see all of this movement, whether it was because of tampering or under the table benefits given to superstars and to go to other teams. Do you really care? And I don't think that we do. I know owners do. I know Mark Lazary is terrified that Giannis Antetokounmpo, the MVP of the NBA, is going to go somewhere else. Because once he goes somewhere else, where do the Milwaukee Bucks go? Unless they get lucky like they did when they drafted him in the first place, how the hell are they going to be relevant? And it's got to be frustrating to him, just like it's got to be frustrating to Michael Jordan, just like it's got to be frustrating to some of all these small market teams that have no chance of landing the 5 or 6, or let's say maybe up to 10 of the superstars that are around the NBA. So owners are going to get pissed, and they're going to get pissed at other owners. And Adam Silver is going to sit back and say, frankly, things like that are being discussed that don't fall within the collective bargaining agreement, nobody cares because nothing can be done. Why? Because we love it. We, as consumers, enjoy it. We, as consumers, crave it, and it creates parity. That's the most important thing that I can say. It creates parity. One thing that the NFL has on almost every other sport, is that almost, not every, but almost any team can rise from nothing into something. The NBA hasn't had that for a long time. They have it now. So the owners are going to complain, but I think the rest of us are quite okay.